Well, I'm going to draw Cutter for you because he's the hero of the story. And first thing I'm going to do is add a new layer to my background, and I'll be doing the ink outline. You can call it ink, it's not really ink, but it looks like it. I'll be doing that on this layer, and then when I have achieved the face, I will add another layer on which I do the color. And then, of course, when the whole thing is done, it can all be folded into one layer. It's called a tiff. Cutter has changed over the years. He started out really young, like maybe you could say in human terms, in his early 20s, and he had a little less hair back then, and it was a little less shaggy. But I find that now that he's older, the shagginess of the hair sort of contributes to his character, gives him, portraits of him kind of a sense of movement. Now, I started a little high, and here's the wonderful thing about working on a Wacom tablet. You can grab your drawing and move it anywhere you want, and you can also size it down if you like. So it's incredibly forgiving. You can put your drawing exactly where you want to on the page, and I just love that, because think if I had just done that drawing on a piece of paper, I would have had to throw that piece of paper away and start all over again. So anyway, yeah, Cutter has changed over the years. He's grown and matured. He started out in his early 20s. He's about 500 years old now. And he's been through a lot, and he's learned a lot, and he's a very important leadership figure for the elves, because he's the one elf of all of his race who remembers. They have because most of them are immortal or very long-lived, they have a tendency to forget. And this means that they are capable of repeating mistakes. But Cutter remembers, and so he can guide his people really well, because he can keep them from getting into jams that they've gotten into before. And that actually makes him more like a human being. He of all the elves, he kind of identifies with humans more than the others do, because he can sense time passing, and that makes him more like a human. But that's the price he's paid for being a chief in times of great changes. And he's had to lead his tribe through these changes, very often just by the seat of his pants, not really knowing what he's doing, but just trying to do his best. And that's something I really like about him. Cutter's kind of my elf. Of all of them, he's the one that speaks for me in Elfquest, and I'm always just kind of trying to roll with whatever punch comes. Just trying to do my best. So now, I'm going to start on the face. A characteristic of my artwork is facial expression. It's one of my strong points among some major weak points. But someone once said that an artist's style is the sum of their mistakes. And I've always loved that saying, and I think it's true. I think that we do exaggerations, and I'm especially thinking of Jack Kirby now, who was one of my major influences long ago. you could never call Jack's superhero art realistic. It was distorted, it was fantastic, it was larger than life, bombastic, just over the top in just about every way I know how to describe, and that's what made it so wonderful. So I suppose there's many an art critic who could say that Jack Kirby made mistakes in his work, in the sense of it not being realistic, or the anatomy of his characters being far from accurate. But that's what made it so special, and I like to think you could say that about the art in Elfquest too. It's very strongly influenced by Japanese anime and manga. In fact, Elfquest is arguably the first American graphic novel to have come onto the scene, showing influence from anime and manga. Here once again is an example of how I can move a line around. I'll undo it to show you. The cheek line was originally there, and I decided it was too narrow, so I moved it over here to balance the face out better, and it's just wonderful to be able to do that. With the elves, the eyes kind of have it. Their eyes are very large, very expressive, and I try to make them look limpid and full of light, because that's part of the fantasy charm of the characters, that even though they may have recognizable human emotions and you're able to identify with them, there's still that element of fantasy, and you know that these characters are kind of unearthly. Just there's something about them that's different from human beings. I always like to put some hair in Cutter's eye, or hanging over his eye, because it's just a little bit sexy. It's something our female fans really enjoy. I'm pretty conscious of what my female readers enjoy, and I like to give them little gifts. Let's see, is he going to be smiling or serious? You have to make decisions like that when you finish a drawing. I think I'm going to give him a smile. And once again, if the mouth isn't in quite the right position, I can just lift it up a little. There we are. That gives him a brighter expression. I can change expressions in interesting ways, like to use the rotate. I can give him sort of a, I can give him a sneer. See, just by twisting his mouth up, he's sort of sneering. But then I can take that same smile and just rotate it a little bit. There we go. And now we have just a straightforward little smile. And I often do that with the pages. I often adjust facial expressions that way. If I want a character to look a little more sly or cheeky, I can do that with their smile without having to redraw the whole thing. Okay, so we've got a pretty good little basic drawing here of Cutter. I'm going to add another layer now, and this is going to go underneath the first one, which is, as you could call it, the inked layer, and I'm going to add some color now. There's various ways you can do this. If the drawing is really, really tight and there aren't any holes in it, you can just kind of select the interior of the drawing and use a tool called bucket which just pours a bunch of pixels into it and fills it up. But this is not a particularly tight drawing, so I'm using my selector to select Cutter's face. Then I'm going to choose a nice skin tone for him. I think that one's a little too... You kind of have to know where everything is. And this is my tools. These are all the tools that I use to do my drawings with. And this is called Bucket, and it's layer 2 that I'm going to put the color on. So it goes underneath, just like that. And then I delete the color from the eyes, because Cutter's actually got big blue eyes. So now I'm going to go get his blue eye color. This is what my little palette is. These are the basic colors I use, and I often do many layers one on top of the other to get various effects. Okay, now he's got his big blue eyes. And then you have to leave a highlight to show the light sparkling in his eyes. I also like to intrude into the eye very much in the Japanese tradition of manga, of making big sparkly eyes. And I'll put a lighter version of the same color into the eye, and that makes it look a little more limpid. Okay, now we're going to color the ear. And his hair. Once you've already colored a space, the pixels don't overlap, and that's really useful, because when you put a second color on, the space where you've colored doesn't go away. Okay, so now here we go. Oops, see, that's an example of filling too much. Okay, so I have to go now I have to go into history, which is one of my favorite elements of working digitally, is that I can go back through my history to the point before I made the mistake, and I don't have to start all over again. Okay, so now the Elfquest characters are pretty complicated designs as comic book or animation characters go. I've seen animators attempt to sort of whittle them down to manageable animation characteristics, and they look a lot more like the way Bruce Timm sort of stylizes his characters, kind of Japanese anime style. But for the purposes of the comics, I still keep quite a bit of detail in. Again, just very quick and dirty, just getting the colors in place. And this is actually very much the way I do the comic. I do it a little messily to begin with, and then little by little I refine all the details so that it starts really looking like a beautiful illustration. Okay, a little more down here for just a little more skin. And let's see. We would see a little more of his neck there. And the rest would be hair. I work very fast, as you can see, but it was a long learning process. I really had to learn to just be able to bounce to any tool that I needed, almost without looking. It's kind of second nature now. Okay, well, I think we will just add a little bit of, maybe a suggestion of green forest atmosphere here. Look at that. Fun, huh?